So today I want to take a few minutes to walk you through Sonny's Blues, just an intro to it, which was written by James Baldwin. James Baldwin was born in 1924 and died in 1987. He was born in New York City, and even though he was born in the city, he was a longtime resident of France. He ultimately became an expatriate. We talked about this with Hemingway. We see this with James Baldwin as well. He did go into ministry when he was young, but he left the church believing it hypocritical and racist. He really had issues with the hypocrisy of the church. And part of this was due to the fact that he realized he was gay as a teenager, and he really he couldn't reconcile the ideals of the church and the fact that he was gay and how the church um, treated people who were homosexual. Ultimately, he became an expatriate due to America's treatment of African Americans. He was really put out with the poor treatment of African Americans, and he just couldn't deal with it, so he left, which many people felt like during that time period was the right decision for him. He ultimately died of stomach cancer. He had several major works. He had Go Tell It on the Mountain, Giovanni's Room, Another Country, If Beale Street Could Talk, and several essay collections, Notes of a Native Son, and Nobody Knows My Name. James Baldwin's considered to be a very prominent writer during his time period, and really a voice for African Americans in this country. His themes also often deal with race and racism and the effect of skin color on social groups as they shape social, religious, and material experiences of the group. So it's a case of, if we're in a group of people, what does one skin color, how does that influence what is happening in that group? And we see these themes really explored in Baldwin's work. Sonny's Blues is a story of redemption. We really have these two brothers. We have Sonny and our narrator, and they have taken very different paths in life. And as a result of that, we're kind of seeing how one of these brothers is going to gain redemption, or maybe both. We see the idea of disillusionment. I talked about this in another video, where disillusionment is where we've been presented with illusions by society or by the people we love of how things ought to be, but when we become disillusioned, we see things for what they really are. And we see that in Sonny's Blues, where these men are no longer seeing things with rose-colored glasses. Instead, they're seeing things as they are. And this really results in both of these brothers dealing with pain and anger, and we see the different paths they take to deal with this. Our narrator has lived a very traditional life in a lot of ways. Even though he and Sonny, his brother, come from a very similar background, our narrator has gone to school, he's become a teacher, and he has a family. But he's still dealing with pain and anger as a result of his circumstances, as a result of the death of his daughter, Grace. And then we have Sonny, who, in order to avoid the pain, in order to run away from the pain, he turns to drugs and to jazz music. And we're going to really see this idea of music, particularly of jazz, being a really strong influence in this story, and how that is used to save Sonny in a lot of ways, and how that music is going to bring these two brothers together. We really see these two brothers not being able to understand each other. Our narrator is very afraid for Sonny, but he's also put out with Sonny. He doesn't understand why Sonny makes the decisions he does, and he's very frustrated by the decisions that Sonny makes. But ultimately, at the end, we see them maybe coming to a little bit of an understanding. So I want you to kind of look for that moment as you're reading the story. Where is it that our narrator is able to understand Sonny? Where is it that they kind of gain some common ground for the two of them? This story begins in what we call medias res, which means that it starts in the middle. So when the story starts, you're immediately going to be in the middle of what's going on. It doesn't really start in the beginning and then go from beginning to end. For example, When you read A Good Man Is Hard to Find, that starts in the beginning where they're talking about going on a trip, and it ends at the end when things happen the way they do. Okay. In this story, we're starting in the middle, and we're going to see Baldwin use both flash forwards and flashbacks, and he's going to play with time a little bit. So it's not going to be chronological. We're going to move um, from childhood into present time, and things, and kind of back and forth to be told this story. So be mindful of the use of flashback here to really understand this story and understand the timing of it. As you're reading, if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out to me.